And we are live. So hello, everyone. I just want to thank you all for joining. My name is Simon Stump, and on behalf of the Ashoka US team, I'm really happy to welcome you all to this Ashoka Huddle. Ashoka Huddles are 60-minute curated conversations on a theme, and today's theme is Beyond Train the Trainer, Scaling Your Learning Infrastructure. Two quick logistical notes. There is a little red record button. That is because we are recording, but we're not necessarily automatically sharing the full recording. So that's the note I just made to folks as we were getting started. You'll have the chance to weigh in if we decide some of what we say here is useful and shareable. And the second thing is that there's this chat function. The chat bubble on the bottom allows you to type to me or to anyone else on the panel, just folks on video. And for folks who are just watching and not on video, it also allows you to share a question. So please use the chat, even just to share links or ideas with folks over this next hour that we are together. We'll break this conversation into two acts. The first will be some context setting and some stories from the Nemati team, and that will be followed by a robust Q&A with everyone. But before we do all of that, I would love to just get a quick round of intros so folks know who will be joining in force in the second half of this conversation. And for that, I would love if folks could share their name, their organization, and also what drew you to this conversation on today's theme. So again, what about Train the Trainer, scaling your learning infrastructure was particularly compelling? And if we would, I'd love to start with Bren and with Emily, who are actually folks who posed this question and got the ball rolling. So again, just quickly your name and your org's name, and what about the theme is you'll be listening for or wanting to learn about today. Starting with Bren and then Emily.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for this. I can't wait to learn today. We have a train the trainer model. We train ocean farmers around the country, growing seaweed and shellfish. And our challenge is there's no way we're going to scale in that way. We have thousands of people that want to start farms, and there's just no way we're going to do it. So we're trying to figure out what is an online platform for growth.
Okay.
So that's the
Brent, it is great to see you. Great to see you, man.
Yeah. Right on.
Emily, also on Team Greenwave, what would you like to add? And I just answered the first two of the three questions. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Hi, everyone. Emily with Greenwave. I'm really excited to hear about your experiences at Nemati. We are, as Bren said, doing a lot of deep thinking about how to scale our operations from training 10 people a year to training hundreds or thousands of people a year and providing all kinds of technical assistance that they might need that we can't provide in a high-touch, hands-on model. So really excited to hear about your experiences. Thanks.
Awesome.
Alexandria, can we go to you?
Sure. I'm Lexi Crampton, and I work for All Our Kin. And what I do is I lead our training and technical assistance work. So that's what drew me to this conversation of how we can scale our work with family child care providers through training.
Perfect. Anne?
All Our Kin in New Haven?
Yes, in New Haven.
I visited you guys a long time ago.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, went to law school in New Haven in like a different century.
Awesome.
Is that me now?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I apologize. I have one of those early summer colds. So I'm Ann Basting. I'm the head of Time Slips, creative storytelling, and we've set up. We train creative engagement techniques for long-term care providers in order to bring meaningful engagement into to elders in long-term care. And we've set up a multi-tiered system of certified facilitators so that they know they're doing it right. And that's all online. And then we have a tier of master trainers that sounds like Greenwave's sort of lesser number of people. And then we're just starting in-house trainer as a third tier, which is someone within the organization who can train inside the organization. So I was really drawn to this just because we're just figuring all this out as well.
Wonderful, welcome. And then Basho.
Hey everyone, nice to be here. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yep, for sure.
I am a partner at Fuel Ed Schools. I'm a partner. We are a self-managed organization. We practice holacracy, so it's a flat organization, no hierarchy. And so everyone that is a full-time staff member is a partner at the organization, which has been an exciting endeavor and really powerful structure. In terms of roles, I handle a lot of the outreach, messaging outreach and scaling of our programs. We do direct service with educators, providing them with the social emotional skills to build relationships inside schools with their colleagues and with students, with the idea that all learning happens in the space of a strong and healthy relationship, and educators are never trained on how to build strong and healthy relationships. And so we're into filling that gap and also spreading a powerful message around schools being a place of relationships first, and then all of the other learning and development happens on top of that. In terms of scaling, we have a direct service program that's been really effective and working at the district level now, so touching a lot of district leaders and school leaders. But there's an element of like the aha moment and then the implementation at the school site level, and then that scales from school to school. We've dabbled in that over the course of the last 12 months, but understanding that community building, my prior life, I was at New Teacher Center doing social community management for a group of 10,000 online teachers in California, and just understanding like Twitter chats and the power of those, and how you build a movement where people are embodying the ideas. And so the train the trainer model and community management is all something that's very current and top of mind for me.
Wonderful, welcome. And then Vivek and Abby, if you all would introduce yourself, and actually just keep, you can hold the mic then. We sold this conversation with a lot of promises, right? You're gonna learn about incentives and measuring tactics, and we're gonna get to more than 11 folks a year. We're gonna really explode this. So if you all would help us introduce yourselves, but also just dive right in with some context and some stories, we're all ears, and we're really excited to hear what you've learned on your own journey.
That sounds great. We are really excited for this conversation. We're keen to share a little bit of our story, and then we're really keen to learn from all of you and discuss with all of you. My name is Vivek, and I started Namati in 2011, and I will just take the liberty of introducing my dear friend and teammate Abby, who was employee number one. We really started it together. We were working together at the World Bank, and then we left together to start Namati. So she's been a part of this journey from the beginning. And I have asked her to kind of like offer these preliminary remarks.
Sure. I'll go into our roles a little bit later once I outline a little bit more what we do. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with our work, so I thought I would just give a little bit of an introduction first, because I think the nature of every kind of community or the learning that you're trying to generate affects your strategies and your tactics. So at Namati, we are driven by a belief that law should work for everyone, not just the wealthy and the powerful. But the way that the world is set up doesn't make that easy, right? So the law and the way it is presented is often complex or intimidating. Traditionally, we lawyers, we are both hailing from the law tradition, we relied on lawyers to help us muddle through the law. But we are often too expensive, too few, too focused on formal court channels that for a lot of people are impractical. If we need more access to justice, and we want everyone to have access to justice, we basically need to look beyond just lawyers. So we believe that the key to putting the power of the law in people's hands is through community paralegals. Community paralegals help people to know, use, and shape the law. And we call that process legal empowerment. Paralegals are trained in the basics of law and government, and often other skills like mediation, community building, advocacy. They are also embedded in their communities. So with this interdisciplinary skill set and this intimate knowledge of how their communities work, they're able to work together with people to come up with practical and meaningful solutions to injustices. We find that community paralegals serve as a dynamic front line of first responders that are particularly effective when they are paired with a small core of lawyers that can pursue litigation or high-level advocacy when needed. We at Namati are building a global movement for legal empowerment with community paralegals at its heart. This network is called the Global Legal Empowerment Network. We are at this point 1,500 grassroots justice organizations strong. We span about 160 countries. And at this point, we collectively deploy tens of thousands of community paralegals. We're investing in building this thriving ecosystem because we understand that there's no way that one organization or any handful of organizations can tackle the sheer scale of problems that the world faces. But we realize that we need a movement that's not only diverse, rigorous, and vibrant in order to take on the world's greatest justice challenges. So we have a multi-pronged strategy for building that movement. I'm not going to delve into all the details of that strategy today. What we've been asked to focus on is the learning component of our work. So I'll take a few minutes to outline some of the key components of our global learning infrastructure. We've always kind of had a dual approach to learning. On the one hand, we've engaged directly in legal empowerment in a small number of countries, working on a few key issues where we feel we can really advance learning around legal empowerment. And then on the other hand, we have the team that I lead, which supports the global network and this greater thriving ecosystem of grassroots justice organizations. It's the latter that I think we'll focus on today and that I think is the most relevant to the folks in this room. So the team supporting the Global Legal Empowerment Network, we work to ensure that every advocate for justice is equipped with the skills and resources that they need to do their work well. We have a number of vehicles and platforms for doing that. Let me outline a few of them. These are all things that we've kind of engineered, designed to help with the spreading of ideas, the sharing of experiences, and helping people to test knowledge. So the first is we host international learning exchanges. These are in-person, hands-on interactions where we bring groups of organizations together to learn from each other, usually for focusing on a particular theme or some particular challenge. We're working on developing that and fleshing that out into more mentorship-like relationships as well. Another thing we do is we host the world's largest online library of resources for legal empowerment. It contains training materials, monitoring and evaluation tools, case management forms, academic research, and more. At this point, there's more than 1,500 resources on the library. It's free for anyone to access. We also host on an annual basis a leadership course. We partner with a number of universities to host. This is really the only leadership course offering in our field. And it works to articulate a common understanding of our history, our field's history, our methodologies, and our evidence. And then on the kind of virtual side of things, we host and maintain an online discussion platform. This helps us to engage people virtually throughout the world. People can seek answers, compare experiences regarding, practical problems and common challenges that they face. They can also learn about upcoming opportunities for professional development. And we pair, again, the online interaction with a series of webinars that we offer. We offer usually 1 or 2 a month. And really this helps us, again, expand our reach quite a bit. We have massively more people who apply for our in-person opportunities than we could possibly accommodate. And this is one way that we can still connect them in with a lot of our work without necessarily bringing them in person. So that's kind of the outline of particular vehicles that we use to promote learning and share knowledge. Am I forgetting anything? Yeah?
Those are the main ones.
All right. So I was just going to outline a few lessons that we've learned. I wanted to also lay out there at the outset that we don't have answers. So I really appreciate how ambitiously you build this meeting. But we're constantly working to improve our approach. We are constantly learning and improving. We've built in iterative feedback loops wherever we can in all of our learning opportunities, because our understanding is not only that there's no perfect or one way to do everything, but also that our field is evolving. Technology is evolving, our society is evolving, and there's no, if we're going to keep up with the best ways to do things, we can't stay static. So I hope that some of the lessons and the thoughts that I can share with you today can maybe spur some ideas or refine some thoughts, but I beg you not to embrace them as solutions that are set in stone. So the first thing that we find incredibly useful for when thinking about increasing uptake and effectiveness of legal empowerment methods is making sure to approach the problem from a stance of humility. We don't know everything, and we don't claim to know everything. So a lot of the learning opportunities that we design are not meant to be one-way channels of information. We design all of our learning opportunities to be organized around peer-to-peer support. We recognize that everyone can learn from everything. Everyone brings something to the table that can benefit others. So we operate off of a principle of mutual exchange. And we find that helps to really open up a lot of different options that and a lot of different learning paths that we might not have contemplated in the design stage early on. The other thing that we really think about is the balance and the complementarity of in-person opportunities and the use of technology. Technology can be the solution to many, many, many things. It's not the solution to everything. And learning is particularly complicated. We found that, across the board, all of the reviews and the surveys that we take, and we take many, as I said, we're constantly creating these iterative feedback loops and trying to learn and improve. It's quite obvious that learning happens better in person. It just does. But in-person interactions are expensive. So there are ways in which we've tried to leverage in-person interactions and building on those things to create a kind of vibrant virtual follow-up kind of world of interactions that can feed each other, feed into each other. So we think about specifically what are the types of learnings that are useful for in-person interactions, what are the types of learnings that are more suitable for virtual interactions. We try and not only direct certain things in certain forums, but we try and help them reinforce each other as much as possible. So for instance, the other week we had an in-person learning exchange in Sierra Leone where we had practitioners focused on environmental justice from all over the continent of Africa convene, as well as some folks from India convene in Sierra Leone. They spent a couple of weeks together really getting into the very tough questions about promoting environmental justice in their particular context. Afterwards, we held a webinar where a number of the participants in the learning exchange presented on some of their on some of the things that they learned and the things that surprised them. Over 300 people registered for that webinar. About 100 people, I think, actually attended. There are still more people that are watching the recording. And that kicked off an online discussion on our platform about certain things that were raised during that webinar. So thinking about synergies between in-person and technological uses is, I think, very useful, not only from, say, a strategic standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. Another thing that we do is there's this concept that we embrace called movement generosity. Our mission as an organization is not about just promoting ourselves. It's all about building up the field and building up our movement. So as much as we can, we take opportunities to enhance the visibility of our network members. We try and give them access to influential forums. We recommend them to panels, to donors looking for information. We try and really cultivate a wider generation of leaders in the field to kind of lessen the burden on ourselves, but also because we realize that to have a truly thriving field, you need to have a diversity of viewpoints and a diversity of leadership styles and approaches. And finally, with that, we take on a co-designing, co-owning, and collaborative stance with a lot of our work, especially in a particular recent effort to generate stronger regional communities. We send out an annual survey every year, and we kind of listen to what people want. One of the things people really wanted to do is work more on a regional level, more closely with people that are in their similar contexts. And because they find that there is a lot of learning that can happen globally and international level, but there's a lot that really a much kind of richer level of learning when you can share with someone who has a similar context. And we're kind of handing the reins over to a number of anchors, thinking about how they would like to run these things. We basically are working with them to kind of co-design different strategies for improving learning in their regions. So those are kind of some of the key lessons that I would say we're drawing from our experience. Again, I'm not sure, they might not apply to every context, so we should definitely discuss. I would love to kind of engage in a richer discussion of what applies to what. There's just a lot of interesting communities that you're supporting here. But I would like to just close with a couple questions that we still continue to struggle with and would love your, your input or suggestions on. One is we're continually balancing, and I'm not sure to what extent this might apply to all of you, but balancing a tension between being a convener and also being a doer. As I mentioned before, we actually engage in legal empowerment efforts on the ground in a couple key countries, in addition to convening this network. And sometimes that relationship or those two responsibilities make our role confusing in the network that we're trying to convene. People don't know if, where that leaves them and how they should be associated with us. We find, the feedback to us from several members has been that it's important that we engage in the actual, the effort, the legal empowerment effort, because our continual learning about the field helps us to be better about cultivating and curating learning for others. And if we were to leave that behind, our perspectives might stagnate, we might be distanced from the actual members that we're trying to support. So that there is a kind of rich feedback that works between those two elements of our work. And it's not only that, but we find, again, taking our stance of kind of humility, that there is a lot that we can learn from the network too. And so we kind of think of ourselves as participating in this cycle of learning where we're giving as much as we can to the network and also trying to draw as much as we can from what the network generates and innovates. Two other things, there's also a tension between how big of a footprint we want or need versus how much more efficiently we might be able to get at systemic change without enhancing that footprint. So we could train millions and millions of paralegals, but would that mean that we would actually get closer to the kind of change in the world that we want to see? Is there actually more of an efficiency going towards, focusing on policy changes or law reforms? And to what extent is our direct footprint, the people that we're training on the ground, necessary for those kinds of systemic change? It's a balance that everyone has to strike, but it's certainly an important thing to discuss and come to terms with when you're developing your strategy. And the last thing is, no matter how many people that we train, no matter how many people that we strengthen, their effectiveness can be perfect. There remains in our field a funding crisis. There is, in the end, very, very severe funding constraints. So the type of work that grassroots justice practitioners can engage in, it really, for such an important field, it's really under-resourced. And so we have taken on, in addition to, I would say, if you're serious about your learning actually having an impact, you have to also think about these externalities to make sure that people have the resources that they need in order to put their learning to practice. And in our case, it would be irresponsible to simply stop at capacity building without thinking about what it takes to make that capacity building sustainable. So one of our major missions as an organization is to kind of grow funding for the field. We've launched a recent global campaign that's focused on that, but over the years, it's been a part of our general approach to our work, is trying to grow funding for the field. So that would be, those are just kind of my key thoughts. I don't know if Vicky, you have some additional ones?
No, I think it's a great start. We look forward to talking about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, wonderful. And those last three questions are so juicy. They're big ones. I wonder where, a couple things jumped out at me, but let's let everyone on the panel sort of weigh in. And I'd love to hear if someone moved to the edge of your seat and wants to just kind of dive right into any of the things that Abby or Vivek just presented here.
It looks like there might be some chat.
I just thought I had a question, but I wasn't sure if you wanted me to ask it out loud or.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Ask it out loud, Anne. That'd be great.
Okay. I think it would be. I'm really curious about where the business model meets the training model and where payment happens, and if there are thresholds in advance and movement through that system. How does it? Where does the payment come from?
The payment of, you mean the funding for the?
If any of this is fee for service, if any of the training,
right.
the trainer models,
right.
or any of that stuff.
So far, we don't charge any fees. The folks that our major constituency tend to be very local grassroots groups with little to no funding. What we've done in the past, for instance, is our legal empowerment course. Technically, the course has a tuition of 2,000 something euros, and we'll usually waive that tuition for grassroots groups, but enforce the tuition for, say, if you're an international NGO or a donor or a UN government, folks like that. So people that can afford and should pay for things like the leadership course will, but by and large, for all of our major constituency, the grassroots justice groups, we have not charged them for anything.
Could you say a little bit more? You alluded to the fact that there's this resource of 1,500 now, articles, resources, I think broadly speaking, but could you just describe that a little bit? And also, like, where is that coming from across the network? Are those, contributions coming from these folks who've been through a number of these engagements you just laid out?
Yeah. So the resource library has grown a lot. It started as a collection of kind of best of resources from a very small collective of organizations that we started to engage for the network. We asked them what were the best resources that they use, what were the best resources that they have. And so it was first kind of a collection of these curated resources from a select group. And then as our network grew, we continually asked folks to share their publications, to share tools that they find useful. One thing that we do whenever people apply for our learning exchanges or for meetings or leaders course, we ask them to attach to the application any useful tools that they've generated or that they have used in the past. And so we crowdsource as much as we can. There are, of course, some of our publications in there, but it's a small minority. We definitely don't publish in the thousands. It's largely crowdsourced from our members.
And then could I ask, and this question essentially builds on one that Lennon Flowers, who wasn't able to join today, but sent through. And it's essentially, if you're able to measure the impact of the resources, much less perhaps the more intense in-person the virtual webinar environments, maybe the presence of the resources and how they land in someone's inbox. How are you able to, make that, you alluded to it, the connection, that presence of these offerings and the real change we see in the world?
Yeah, we've developed, that's a great question. We've developed a pretty intense process. So every time someone downloads a resource, they get an email from one of our staff saying, we hope you enjoyed that resource. Is there anything else that you're looking for that we can do for you? Any recommendations? Not everyone will respond. Some people just want a thing, but a lot of people will. They'll say, hey, I'm looking for more of this, this, and this. And we'll generally follow up and try to connect them either to discussions on the discussion forum or more resources or contacts that we know. We also have, so this is it's something that happens with every download. We also have, again, our annual survey. We'll ask people what they found useful and why, and we get a lot of incredibly rich qualitative feedback about more so than we had expected. People are really excited to talk about things that they find that are useful. So, for instance, in this year's annual survey, there's just been a lot of rich feedback about what they found in the resource database that was useful and why, and some really great feedback about how to improve the library and the search functions as well. So all of that has been incredibly helpful to us.
I would just add something there, which is like on this question of impact. Abby was saying that sort of we're kind of working at two levels. There's 6 countries where we're working on legal empowerment directly, and then there's this global network where we're really trying to foster a wider global movement dedicated legal empowerment. When we're working on legal empowerment directly, impact is measured in remedies. Like, are we actually getting solutions? Is a factory that was unlawfully polluting not polluting anymore? Is a mom who was denied a identity card wrongfully able to actually get her identity card? That those remedies are the unit of impact for the direct work, and whether paralegals are actually solving problems and getting remedies. That is how you measure impact there. For the network, one metric that we have been zeroing in on is, did you improve based on something you learned? And we're getting to a place where between the annual survey, which is, we've been getting a few hundred responses out of a total of about 5,000 members, plus some random member calls that we are starting to do. Between those, we're getting to a place where we're going to have roughly a 10% sample for that question, which is like, through either if you came to a learning exchange in person or because you downloaded a resource, did your work get better because of your engagement with this network? And if so, how? And that feels like a kind of useful indicator for whether we're having an impact, because in the network dimension, which is ultimately what we want to know, is whether our members are getting better at what they do.
Hey, it's Bren. I got a quick question. It's sort of in the early stages, how did you roll it out? Did you roll it out as sort of a full suite of tools, or did you send out some, small ones, test it, get feedback, and then keep expanding?
Very much it was not a full suite of tools at the outset. For instance, when we first started off, I would say we just had the resource library. It was just, and even initially the idea was just to have a database.
And there were initial in-person exchanges. That's the other thing we started out doing. Yeah. In
order to kind of build our network, we had an initial round of, they weren't necessarily structured the same way we do now, which were they're pretty intensive learning exchanges. It was more kind of these regional convenings where people would talk about, in more general terms, things that they could share and learn from each other. So we did start off with a series of meetings, around 60 or so people per meeting, regional based, and then this kind of resource library. And then, people were like, we need more ways to talk to each other than just email. How do we build up a way to kind of save all of the different emails that we're sending to people that repeat the same thing over and over again? So then we started investing in building a discussion forum with archival capacity. And then, people really were calling for kind of more intensive one-on-one exchanges where they could really dive deep into issues where, these kind of larger meetings were kind of at a certain level. And so we procured some seed funding to test out a couple, 1 or 2 learning exchanges. From those experiences, we managed to, there was a huge amount of positive feedback, and so we managed to kind of transform that into greater support for for more and more. But like I said, we're kind of experimental and committed to being nimble and learning. So we test things to see how they do before we invest in things a lot more. So a lot of the things that I described, we would do a pilot and assess before expanding or revising as necessary.
I was going to say, just getting super practical, that the software we use for the discussion platform is Discourse, which is an open source software. We actually paid someone to start building something, and then ended up tossing that out and feeling that Discourse was much more useful. So if you want to check out an example of Discourse in action, you could go to our site and look at the platform. But it allows you to have multiple conversations on different topics that are pretty well archived and easily searchable, and you have an identity as a member of a community, and you can sort of track who's saying, like you can go to that particular person and find out what they've been saying about things, et cetera.
In general, from a financial standpoint, we've been, and also from an ethical standpoint, we've been trying to invest as much as we can in open source options versus, custom made builds.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent, really helpful. Thank you.
Building on that, I have another question. I'm wondering how you sort of built up the necessary staffing capacity to support the platform, to support the inquiries you're getting from people who are using the resources you're providing. Like, what kind of internal capacity did you need to manage that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So as we were saying, we kind of grew organically from kind of a smaller portfolio of actions and projects to something that right now is quite complex and ambitious. So we started out with a staff of me. There was one person. I added one person at a time, really. For a while, it was me and one other junior staff for like the first year or two. Then we realized we really needed someone with some technological capacity. So we added a tech person and then someone to help with a lot of the learning, to focus specifically on learning events. Then we were a team of 4 for another kind of year or so. Then we needed some help on, there was again a lot of demand for advocacy work, especially at that time. It was around if you're familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, there was a need for a lot of advocacy around that. So we kind of built out our advocacy and communications roles. At this point now, we are 9 people. We started in 2012 with one person. So
the network team is 9 people. Yeah. Numathi is like 150 people, which also gives you a sense of a lot of what Numathi is up to is engaging in direct legal empowerment work, and a lot of the learning we can offer the network is coming from those direct efforts. But the team that's focused on the global network is 9.
Yeah.
Got it. Super helpful. Thanks.
I'd be interested in, knowing what 150 people are doing on the direct service work. And then I think we heard the number 5,000 folks maybe as online, at least logged in as members for the global network. Like, how is the goal for everyone to get, to this space where they're identifying as a community paralegal and that's the way they pay their bills, or they're identifying, they're putting up a placard in town and folks know to to resource them, or is it just to identify, to align with this movement? Like, how big an ask are we, what's the hope as we build this community? Because I'm thinking of the folks on this call. Some folks are, the value proposition is I want to give you a brand new job and identity and way of moving through the world. I think that's part of what you're offering too, and that's a big ask, right? So how do we get people to the reality of that?
I would say, I don't know if you have numbers handy, Abby, but our membership is a mix of the different categories you just mentioned. There are people who are paralegals themselves, and that's their livelihood.
Okay.
I actually think my impression, and I don't know, we could pull numbers on this, but my impression is that the largest share is not people who are paralegals, but people who are playing some sort of leadership or senior role in a legal empowerment organization that has a front line of paralegals. So maybe they're a lawyer that works with a team of 50 paralegals, or they're a manager or an M&E person at a group that is engaging in grassroots legal empowerment, has paralegals connected to them, and are trying to think about, at a sort of organization-wide way, how do I make this happen in my context? We're working on gender-based violence in Mali, or prisoner paralegals in Pakistan, and I am running this organization, and I want knowledge on methods, on how to generate the right evidence, on how to manage our cases, on the best ways to train our paralegals, et cetera. I actually feel like my sense is that the largest share of our members are in that category, and then part of that is because the people who are the community paralegals themselves, a lot of them aren't online in the same way. And so it's tougher for that, or they don't speak English. Yeah, language is a huge barrier, and so it's tougher for that layer to be, a little bit more rare for that layer of people to be directly involved in this global community. One of the advantages of the Abby mentioned that we're at this point trying to diffuse leadership in the community, and we're recognizing these regional anchors. And the more local you get, when you've got a regional anchor, for example, in Latin America, everything that the regional anchor is doing is in Spanish. Suddenly the likelihood that paralegals themselves are going to be part of things goes up. And so that is one of the advantages of decentralizing. We also have in the community people who are researchers, there are some folks who are on the government side where they are looking to fund or somehow liaise with or recognize civil society legal empowerment efforts. We have people who are donors, but my sense is that the largest share is people from grassroots legal empowerment groups, but tending to be somewhere in the leadership of those groups rather than the paralegals themselves.
And do you find, is it like the pros and cons of having such a diverse, network or member profile? I imagine, if you really were to zoom in on one particular segment, you might speak more directly to their needs, but other folks not following along.
I think actually it's an asset. So I think it enriches the conversation to have a variety of perspectives. And even if we were to focus on a particular level or strata within organizations, there's such diversity within that strata that there's no monolithic, the way that our field has kind of evolved, there's no really, and what we're trying to do is standardize a lot of that, or at least come to agreement on it, but there's no monolithic way of approaching how to set up a legal empowerment outfit, or how to do, some are more lawyer-based, some are more paralegal-based, some are more activist, some are more kind of academic in nature, some focus on this kind of, more transactional problems, some focus more on collective action. And so no matter what, you're going to be dealing with diversity. And so I feel like, at least in the most popular conversations that I've observed in the forum, having that diversity has really been something that draws people to it.
There is, but I would say yes, and there is sometimes a tension around this exact question. So just take the leadership course as an example, which Abby mentioned, which is we do that in partnership with NYU Law now and Central European University in Europe once a year. It's super competitive. We get over 500 applications for less than 50 seats. And the way we have been doing it is that it's the majority are from grassroots legal empowerment organizations, which really is our core constituency. Like if you had to put someone first, it's those organizations. Within the organizations, we've been very open. We often have the leaders, and we would actually love to have more of the paralegals themselves be a part of our community.
Sure.
If we can get over the language barriers, et cetera. But we have also had at the legal empowerment leadership course, we've had some folks from government and some researchers. And one of the things that we've considered is, should we, one advantage, and some donors, some folks from domestic governments and some researchers. They've always been representatives from each of those three categories, in addition to the majority being from grassroots groups. One of the advantages was that Anne's question? One of the advantages is the tuition that the other three groups pay helps to subsidize the scholarships for the grassroots organizations. So there's that financial reason. But that notwithstanding, if we could solve that, we sometimes have wondered, should we really just have it be all grassroots groups at the leadership course? Then we could really go deep, focus on methods. We're all kind of starting from the same place. But on the other hand, some of the best impact that has come out of that course is creating coalitions between government researchers, donors, and grassroots groups that then go home and make magic because they had that experience together for a week. And so from the participants, we have heard that one of the advantages has been that from Bangladesh or from Indonesia, you had key representatives from those 3-4 categories. And especially for the non-legal empowerment practitioners, the government and the donors and the researchers, the experience is so formative, and it's kind of meant that they have champions when they go back home from those different corners. And so that is an argument for continuing that diversity in the course. And I feel like that's a live tension for us. We're still not totally sure which way we want to go if we were able to raise enough money to make the tuition no longer necessary.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because what you're describing is not just training the trainers, but creating this learning this learning environment, which is the theme of the conversation. So,
right, yeah,
obvious to everyone here. But
I have one other.
I wonder where else are there questions? We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure that folks who
I got a question, but somebody else jump in if don't let me take up space. Okay. I'm wondering two things. Is how do you think through what's like behind? Well, I don't know what if it's called like a privacy wall. What's sort of internal password protected for membership, and what's just totally open to the public?
Great question.
And then the other question is, what if you feel comfortable talking about this? What did you put on offer to the community that didn't take? That just people didn't use?
Yeah, great question.
Sort of little micro failures. Since my life is filled with them.
Ours too. Yeah. Do you want to, in the first one, maybe you can speak to kind of the idea of core membership as well, like the idea of sort of peers.
Sure. So was it like a security privacy question, or was it a?
That was what you were asking.
Well, no, actually, who in your constituency or in the movement is gets the full suite of absolutely everything that's offered, and are there other things that are just public? If I went there right now, I could use stuff.
Open access.
I do think that's
yeah.
And then the second one was like things that didn't work, things that didn't take off.
Yeah. Oh, there's lots of those. Okay, so we have what we call general members. Anyone who has a computer or access to any kind of device can sign on through our online sign-up form and become a general member.
It takes 10 minutes.
Not even. It depends on how forthcoming you want to be, but it takes a couple minutes and it's free. So, and we're rolling it out in different languages right now. It's in English and in Spanish, and we'll hopefully have it in other languages as well. You have access to, you have access to the resource library even if you're not a member. The resource library is just for the public. But you have access to the discussions, the online discussion board, and you have access to webinars. There's lists of opportunities and things. There's a community calendar. There's other things, but basically the online suite of options is what you get access to. Then there's a set of members that we call core members. Core members are people that filled out a much more extensive application and are vetted. So we have, for every core member, we've called references or have some kind of reference point, external reference point to legitimize the fact that, yes, they are who they say they are in good standing, and they are a legal empowerment organization, or an organization that has been engaging legal empowerment at least for a year is our cutoff. And once you're a core member, you're eligible to take part in in-person activities, such as learning exchanges and other kinds of meetings that we have hosted in the past. Separate from that is the leadership course. It's a slightly different animal because it's in partnership with, again, as Viva was saying, NYU and the Central European University. And because it's targeted a lot more towards a more diverse array of people, governments, researchers, and whatnot, you don't have to be a member to apply and be accepted into the leadership course. However, you're highly encouraged to. All of the follow-up conversations happen on the network platform, so we do draw from there.
You sort of become a member by virtue of getting into the course.
Yeah.
A core member.
Right, exactly. I mean, to get into the course, you have to go through some vetting. So essentially, there's just two levels. There's a vetted level and a non-vetted level. We knew that we didn't have the capacity to vet every single person that would want to join the network. So far, we've been able to handle the amount of people that are interested in the core membership opportunities. If we can't in the future, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come.
I know Brent had a second part of his question, but Anne, the question you posted in the chat around whether or not there's a license agreement with trainers, or if you're able to revoke anything, exit the relationship if they're not doing it right, might just match with the core membership. But what if folks, and I don't know if you want to add anything, but what if folks are identifying as Namati trained, community paralegals, and you're not liking what they're up to?
Yeah, I guess just sort of stepping back and just a word more about our approach to legal empowerment in general. I am curious, if we had more time, I would love for this to more be an exchange, because I'd love to hear how Green Wave is thinking about this and how each of your organizations kind of approach this. But it's actually 8 countries where we have boots on the ground. We are really picky about who we're working with. It's like getting married. I mean, the process of choosing those partners, because sometimes we're doing it directly, sometimes it's with partners. And when we're picking partners, it's like getting married. It's an extremely intense vetting process on both sides, and we choose them very carefully. And we vouch. I mean, we vouch for the quality and the excellence of everything that those frontline paralegals are doing in all of those 8 countries. And that's a big part of what Namati is we're trying to achieve transformative impact on some key justice issues: community land rights, environmental justice, citizenship rights, and the right to health, with teams and with partners in these 8 countries. That itself, we could be an organization by ourselves just doing that alone. And there, the bar is really high in terms of quality control, in terms of partner selection, in terms of tight management structures, in terms of accountability. On the other hand, with the global network, we don't think of this as Namati knows how to do it, and we're trying to equip others to send them on their way to take Namati's approach and do it in their own place. We don't quite think of it that way. Abby spoke to this. We think of it more as like we need a movement for legal empowerment. And the movement for legal empowerment needs to be much bigger than us alone. Definitely, we are generating cutting-edge learning in those 8 countries. And we would love it for groups to run with that learning, and we make that learning available. So I think Abby might have mentioned, we recently launched this environmental justice practice guide based on over 150 cases that our paralegals in India have handled, and people from over 70 countries joined the webinar to hear about the practice guide, which is to say that there are people in our community who want to run with this stuff, but we only want them to run with it if they feel compelled to, and they might equally run with something from someone else in our network. Abby mentioned that sort of emphasis on peer-to-peer learning. And so for the narrow set of 8 countries where we are operational, the bar is really high, the accountability is high, the selectivity is high, and yes, we have mechanisms by which if we come to a disagreement or if we're not satisfied, we would step out of a partnership. For the global field building effort, it's much more open access, peer-to-peer, low accountability. We're trying to let many flowers bloom and grow a movement that's much bigger than us. And we realize that to do that at the scale we're talking about, we have members in 130 countries. Oh, if you take it organization-wide, there's organizations from 130 countries in our network. There's no way we could do any kind of quality control or anything like that. And so we're just sort of happy. We're just kind of okay with it being bigger than us and out of our control. And we're hoping that there's a certain momentum and coherence that can emerge over time organically, but we can't really force that. I don't know if that helps, Anne, to your question.
Right on point. It's so helpful.
Yeah, exactly. It's this concept of multiple tiers, and that's yep, exactly.
Yeah, so that, right, exactly. So that for that narrow tier, we're trying to do it really, really well ourselves, and in that bigger tier, We're trying to grow a movement that's bigger than us, and we got to be humble in that. We have a lot to share with our network members, but we have a lot to learn from them as well. And we have disagreements with network members, and they have disagreements with each other. And it's just something, it's a much bigger, messy tent. But one of the things that we haven't been talking about on this call that has helped to give coherence to that wider community is joint advocacy. So it's not just about what we're doing with the network. It's not just about helping groups to learn to get better. The other piece of it is we want that wider movement, that wider community to come together to improve the policy environment for legal empowerment. Abby mentioned that the work we do has almost no funding. It's totally unprioritized in rich countries and poor countries alike. And the work we do is under threat. Paralegals get killed. Paralegals face death threats. The work they do is dangerous. And so the two big priorities for the policy environment are financing and protection. And we have a global campaign on right now to improve on both of those things at the international level, in national settings, and having that common campaign and the common language that comes with, the common arguments that we are mustering. That is one of the things that gives congealment and coherence to this big messy tent. And the other thing is moments like the leadership course or the learning exchange. Those are opportunities for us to offer a common vocabulary. Even the mailers we send out to our list. I don't think you mentioned this, Abby, but another way in which we're communicating our list is we send, which most people do. We send mailers every couple weeks, and they're not about here's what Numati did yesterday. They're about community as a whole. Here are new resources that might be useful to you. Here's this new practice guide. You could join the webinar to hear about it. So whether it's the mailers or the leadership course, these are opportunities for us to offer a common vocabulary, to offer, to hone in and discern and distill insights that are growing out of the field as a whole. And those are opportunities for us to kind of nudge in the direction of greater coherence, greater mission alignment across this big messy party. but they're kind of incremental the level of control we have is little to none in terms of what members are actually doing with all this.
I did see you run out the clock on Bren's question about sharing your micro failures, but it was all very fascinating. And we did run out the clock though. So I think what this means is next time we get you all together, Vivek, you have to just start by saying some things you failed at. But
we have a whole other website and a whole other platform and a whole other resource library that completely failed.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
No, but thank you for sharing. I mean, everybody for joining, to the two of you for sharing, for Bren, Emily for posing, kind of getting the ball rolling on this theme, obviously, and Lexi Basho, and then the other folks in the wings attending. It's been a really rich conversation. Like I said, we will record it. We'll loop back to you all if there's any sensitivities around sharing any of this. We'll also take some time to pull out some of the key learnings and lift up the leadership really represented here. We appreciate all the work you're doing so much, and of course you all for sharing it so freely with us. So thank you, everyone. We'll meet here on the next Ashoka Huddle soon. And have a great
guys.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much.
Yeah,
Great seeing you.
Thanks all. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.